Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Tonight I wanted to talk to you about the latest updates when it comes to the ceasefire in Gaza, with both a Hamas delegation and an Israeli delegation present in Cairo, and indications that we are at the biggest stage of a potential ceasefire taking place very soon in Gaza. I also wanted to talk to you about the latest developments when it comes to Syria, what's happening on the ground, the reactions internationally from what's happening, the Israeli aggression in the southern parts of Syria, and the Turkish advancements in the north alongside the Syrian opposition that is now officially controlling Syria. I'm going to start off with Gaza. So the acting head of political bureau from Hamas, Khalil al-Hayya, he was in Cairo alongside an Israeli delegation. Generally, when both a Hamas delegation and Israeli delegation are present at the same time, this indicates that a higher level or a more advanced level of a ceasefire has been reached. Because you would go from one side to the other, the mediators would do that, in this case, the Egyptian mediators, and they would finalize the last things that the two parties have different opinions on, so that they can agree and so that they can have a draft when it comes to the ceasefire. So the reports that are coming indicate that we are at an advanced stage. There have been multiple reports that the Hamas delegation handed in a list with potentially Israelis to be released, alongside feedback coming from Israel about positivity and agreeing to certain demands that were requested by Hamas, including a reduction in the number of Israelis released in the initial phase and withdrawal from key areas in the first phase of the ceasefire. So we're still talking about a ceasefire that will come at least 3 phases. However, the only thing that we're talking about at the moment is an advanced talk regarding the first phase and the increase of the first phase from 42 days to 60 days. So what does it include exactly? Well, we're talking about an initial phase that would gradually increase to a complete ceasefire, during which Israel will start withdrawing from locations it is occupying inside of the Gaza Strip. And the key area that they will be withdrawing from is the Philadelphia corridor or the Rafah crossing. The Israeli excuse is that they will be withdrawing to allow aid to come in from Egypt. However, this is clearly something that the Egyptian side has been pressing on, alongside, of course, persistence from Hamas and the Palestinian side that Israel must withdraw from Rafah and eventually from all of Gaza gradually, so that they can have full control of the territory and get all of the aid in and let the people back to their places. It would also include aid going into Gaza, up to 400 trucks a day, people gradually returning to areas that Israel will be withdrawing from. It would also include the building of a field hospital coming from Egypt, because Egypt previously proposed building a field hospital. As a matter of fact, they prepared some of them in the Sinai Peninsula already. However, the fact that Israel occupies the Rafah crossing alongside the Philadelphia corridor couldn't let Egypt do that. And during the first phase, 100 Palestinians with heavy sentences will be released. These are people who participated in armed resistance, alongside all women and children and men over 50. So we're talking about potentially thousands in the first phase, again, depending on the numbers, because Israel, of course, they kidnapped many Palestinians and tortured many of them to death even. But it would be a significant number when it comes to the Palestinian side, and a limited number when it comes to Israel. And again, the fact that the Palestinian side is showing a list with Israelis who are alive in Gaza, because Israel killed many of them during their genocide campaign that is still ongoing. In the past 24 hours, Israel killed over 20 Palestinians. They are still suffering tremendous losses and day-to-day suffering. However, these talks are a clear indication that we are looking at an advanced period when it comes to the ceasefire, clarifying further the talks that came from Qatar yesterday about them seeing positive signs from the US administration that they would like to see a ceasefire in Gaza, potentially even before the arrival of Donald Trump and him taking office by the end of January. And the report even said it would be before the 5th of January that we would reach this ceasefire. So we're talking about a very advanced phase and potentially a very much needed relief for the citizens of Gaza who have been facing an ethnic cleansing and genocide campaign inside of the Gaza Strip. Which leads us to Syria. In Syria, things are evolving very quickly. Every single day we have more and more updates. However, the signs that we're seeing from Syria are, firstly and primarily, the fact that this transition of power came at a relatively low cost of losses when it comes to people inside of Syria. We haven't had any reports of civilians being killed. The forces that used to belong to the Assad regime, they withdrew and they handed in their weapons. The opposition forces that are now establishing a transition government, they gave amnesty to everyone in the Bashar al-Assad regime previously, so long as they handed in their weapons and they did not fight. And they are also highlighting the importance of protecting the national institutions inside of Syria because they belong to the Syrian people, and giving many reassurances to every single Syrian person that they will be protected regardless of their background, and that the new Syria will belong to everyone and everyone will be helping rebuild it. So the head of the opposition, Al-Julani, or known in his public name, Ahmad al-Shara, he met with the prime minister of Bashar al-Assad during this handing of power. Several of the opposition forces were in a meeting with the prime minister that used to serve Bashar al-Assad. And now we have a new acting transitional prime minister inside of Syria who is working to, of course, get the service to the public when it comes to protection, safety, policing, making sure everything is running and functioning properly, and preventing acts of chaos in the whole of Syria, because now they control the majority of Syria. However, they are not only controlling the majority of Syria without any challenges. They are facing challenges. Despite the fact that we had more and more recognition coming from countries globally, now Russia, they raised the flag of the new Syria in Russia, confirming that Russia is indeed recognizing the new government. And also the new forces of Syria, they are controlling Latakia, which houses the Tartus and Hamimim base that are under Russian control, and nothing is happening over there. Everything is fine and the bases are functioning properly, the Russian bases. This is indicating that there has been indeed an agreement when it comes to the Russian authorities and the new Syrian government, and more embassies that again used to operate under Bashar al-Assad in many capitals across the world are changing their flags and telling the Syrian people that now Syria belongs to everyone. We're no longer the previous government and we're here to serve you. So clearly we're looking at a very peaceful transition when it comes to Syria so far. Not, however, without challenges. The challenges that remain are from the northeast when it comes to the SDF or PKK allied groups, and from the south when it comes from none other than the genocide entity trying to expand and using the vacuum that has been created in Syria to control territories and attack strategic locations when it comes to Syria. And we'll start off with the southern part, and then we will go to the northern part. When it comes to Israel, they have increased their attacks inside of Syria, and they are now controlling Al-Qunaitra area. Israel is now illegally occupying parts of not only Mount Hermon, but also Al-Qunaitra. These acts of Israel, these criminal acts, have been condemned. They have been condemned by Egypt. They have been condemned by Jordan. Of course, the Zionist excuse, as always, would be, we are trying to have a security belt. But at the end of the day, Israel, you're talking about a neo-colonialist expansionist project. They will not only be pleased with these areas, it is very likely that they will try and expand to further areas inside of Syrian territories, again, using the vacuum and trying to apply pressure on the new Syrian government and people in power in Syria to get everything that Israel wants. However, this situation, when it comes to Israel, is not only, we're not only talking about ground invasion. The way they're justifying it is, of course, in terms of security, and they have been, the Israeli media is talking in a very negative manner about Ahmad al-Shara or al-Julani, saying that you're talking about a crazy man, you're talking about a massive terrorist, you're talking about an ISIS member. It doesn't matter if he calls them HTS now. Some of the Israeli media is trying to be more accurate and saying that he is indeed having a transition, trying to reassure minorities inside of Syria. But Israel is playing on the security card, playing on the vacuum card, and playing still on some of the minorities cards when it comes to the southern part of Syria. This is something that is going to be a very large challenge, and Israel is already testing the transition government inside of Syria, and we haven't heard responses from the new government in Syria when it comes to these invasions that are coming from Israel. And it wasn't just invasions. Israel confirmed that they carried out over 150 attacks in Syria. What did they attack? They attacked strategic places. They attacked what they said was a chemical weapons factory, arms factories, the naval base of Syria, and many of their air force bases and military bases too. Now, mind you, when it comes to Syria, the Syrian army was a weak army. They don't have an advanced army. Most of their weapons are old. Their navy is hardly there. Their air force is very, very old and hardly functional. And Israel is targeting. Why is Israel targeting it? Israel is targeting it because it's worried. It's worried that it will be in the hands of the new Syrian transition government that will be posing a threat on Israel with these potentially weapons that they would obtain or certain bases. Again, not that we're talking about any advanced weapons. In addition to that, this also indicates that Israel wasn't necessarily worried about these bases when it comes to the Assad government. Assad had all of these bases. They were not attacked. What was attacked previously, primarily apart from certain attacks on some of the bases, but not in this level of intensity. This intensity hasn't been seen since 1974. Israel, when it comes to the attacks in Syria, they used to attack Iranian bases. So they used to view the Iranian presence and the transition, of course, of weapons from Syria to Lebanon to Hezbollah as a threat, and they were not attacking Assad. And that leads us to some comments that were revealed in Iran. In Iran, there have been several reports in the last couple of days about Assad backstabbing Iran, about betrayal. Multiple reports came out about Iran losing faith in some media outlets, and that Iran also wanted Bashar al-Assad to have a settlement both with the Syrian opposition and in coordination with Russia, and Turkey, who are key players when it comes to Syria. These reports are being continued also in Turkey and in Russia too. Russian reports also said that Russia offered al-Assad to continue down the Astana path and join with the opposition, create a new Syria. And he refused, according to them. That was something that was clearly continued or repeated by Iran as well, indicated that there is a level of genuinity when it comes to this report. And that's when it comes to the risk of Israel. But the intervention in Syria is not only when it comes to the south. Of course, the Syrian opposition is heavily backed by Turkey. They receive training in Turkey, they receive arms from Turkey, and they receive Turkish participation. And now they are taking control of more territories in the northeastern part of Syria that is controlled by the SDF. The SDF, or the Syrian Democratic Forces, consists of movements aligned with the PKK and other organizations that Turkey considers hostile along the northeastern part of Syria. Now, several days ago, or just about yesterday, all of this area here was yellow. And now we can see certain expansions when it comes to the Syrian National Army and the HTS, so the Syrian opposition, because they have several armed groups towards the northeast when it comes to Syria, despite threats from the United States 2 days ago, warning the Syrian opposition not to expand into Kurdish-controlled territories in the northeast. Clearly, the United States does have a plan to partition Syria, but when it comes to the Syrian opposition, they are clearly looking to have a united Syria with everyone included. Now, mind you, this split in Syria has been there post-2011, so for the majority of the time, you had US bases, you had the SDF, and you had other movements with Bashar al-Assad's presence. Likewise, with Israeli attacks in Syria. Israel used to attack Syria on a regular basis, and we used to report about that without Syrian response, because they lack the capacity to a large extent when it comes to fighting back Israel at the time, because they were busy internally. And that situation is not only that it's the same now, it's far more complicated. So now the situation, you talk about a massive vacuum, a transition, and Israel is of course trying to capitalize as much as possible when it comes to this transition to try and prevent this from going smoothly, especially with all of the talk about the opposition as a whole in its entirety, as like ISIS, or the leader of HTS as a terrorist, and as if you're not talking about people who can be reasoned with, despite the fact that we're having different approach when it comes to other countries globally. So the Syrian opposition, they had operations here in Deir ez-Zor and in Kabajib, alongside other areas here. Multiple clashes in areas that are inside SDF-controlled territories. And we also had shelling. We had shelling from Turkish forces in the areas of Al-Raqqa and other parts too, when it comes to the northeastern part of Syria. So we're talking about a situation where, the biggest players here in the Syrian civil war, number one, the Syrian opposition now trying to establish itself and have a united Syria, alongside Turkey, Israel, Russia, and the United States. But the main players are now Turkey and Israel. And when it comes to Turkey, not only that they are supporting the armed groups, the armed opposition in Syria, or the transition government now, soon to be an established transition government, they are also supporting Syria with weapons. So yesterday we had reports of arms being channeled to Syria, and we're talking about tanks and also air defense systems. These things are very significant when it comes to Syria. Now, these are not necessarily going to be used immediately, but the fact that Turkey is already deploying tanks and air defense systems, this is something extremely significant. And Turkey is realizing that Israel is a threat, and they are preparing themselves from the north that hasn't yet been touched by Israel, but Israel has attacked areas up to the Latakia area on the coastal location areas, again, that they did target previously when Assad was there, but they haven't reached areas where closer to the Turkish border. So I had this video being published yesterday.
يا محمد الولي مدرعات حمودي
And this was only one video that was released yesterday with the Turkish deployment in North Syria with the heavy weapons. When we're talking about potentially air defense systems and tanks, you're talking about heavy arms when it comes to Turkey. Now, there's an argument that, of course, these could be used against the SDF, which is very likely. They would be likely to use them. But the fact that this is being channeled into Syrian territories and is not being used from Turkish territories is a massive progress. Why? Because with the attacks on the Kurdish or the SDF, mainly Kurdish-backed movements or PKK movements, we're not just talking about like the Kurdish population as a whole, of course, but the areas over there, they used to be conducted from within Turkish territories. But now that these weapons are going into Syrian territories, this is a massive progress. Why is it a massive progress? Well, because now they will be belonging to Syria, even if they are being supported by Turkey. And Turkey in Syria, they would be liberated from any sort of ties that they have as a NATO state, because Turkey is a member of the NATO. Now, a large argument when it comes to Turkey and its participation in any type of warfare, or even the potential escalation when it comes to Israel, that is looking likely to happen at some point in the future or in the very near future as well. The main obstacle were the geographical barriers. Turkey did not have borders with Israel, unlike Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and Egypt. So now that we have an administration in Syria that is very much aligned with Turkey, you are talking about Turkey being at liberty without any ties of the NATO. Now, this doesn't mean we could potentially see everything explode all of a sudden, although things are moving very, very fast. But the fact that Turkey only 12 or 13 days into this campaign, the deterrence of aggression, and now we already have a new government in Syria, is deploying heavy weapons without any official agreements from the new government or without any transition government still being established, indicates that Russia is taking precautionary measures. So Israel is having the excuse of having these security concerns and illegally occupying Syrian lands and having attacks in Syria in fear that the new government would take control of them. Not that they would actually benefit from them because they're very old. They would have to work on, firstly, uniting Syria completely, having everything under the control. They are still, in many cases, looking for prisoners that have been in prisons for dozens of years without anyone knowing about this. So there's a humanitarian issue to be dealt with, and there are many things to be considered too. But clearly, Israel is already testing that. But Turkey is taking these measures. Now, one thing that we could see, and one thing can lead to another when it comes to Syria, is a situation where we have an established Syria. There is a Syrian government that is solid now, or transition government. Then we could potentially see Turkey having an agreement. Turkey having an agreement with Syria. With the level of influence of Turkey in Syria, you could be talking about Turkey being at liberty of doing many things inside of Syria. Turkey has an interest in they were developing in the process of having a pipeline from Qatar that goes to Europe as an alternative to Russia after the sanctions that have been imposed by Western countries against Russia following the war in Ukraine. And they were in talks with President Assad with regards to that. However, a report said that Assad refused to continue with these negotiations, that he did not want anyone to participate with him in power. But now that they have a government that they have been supporting all along, they have supported the Syrian revolution from the beginning, Turkey, everything would run more smoothly to them. However, not without Israeli problems. Israel is the main problem in this area, and Israel would look to look for its interests inside of Syria. Many countries have interest. The US has interest, Turkey has interest, Russia has interest, and other countries, they have interest inside of Syria. And each side is looking to maximize on their interests inside of Syria. But of course, when it comes to the Israeli side, they completely disregard everything to do with the actual population. I mean, when it comes to the statements that are coming from Turkey and even Iran, ex-allies of Assad, and even Russia now, who are allies of Assad, is that we want what's good for the Syrian people. We hope that Syria remains whole, and we would like to see Syria thrive. And even Al-Julani himself, he did not rule out strategic ties with Iran. You're talking about a man who fought Iran inside of Syria. And now he's saying, so long as we don't have Iran imposing their will and supporting Assad against us under any excuse, because we have our own situation, we wouldn't have a problem in having strategic ties with them. And that's not something that is extraordinary or unlikely. The smooth transition, the fact that the areas that the Iranian armed groups that came from Afghanistan and other locations too, in some of the holy sites, they removed themselves, and these locations are peaceful, and everything is normal with every community in Syria, whether Christians or Shia or any other community. This indicates that there has been an understanding also with Iran. However, Israel would be the biggest obstacle. Now, how long are we going to see this transition period? And will the northeastern part of Syria, which is a large chunk not yet under the control of the new government in Syria be under Syria? Will they reach an agreement with them? There have been calls that let's get rid of every foreign intervention and have what's best for the interests of the Syrian people. But the United States, in many cases, is talking on behalf of the SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces in the northeast, and threatening the Syrian National Army, like they used to threaten Bashar al-Assad previously. However, this is not stopping the Syrian opposition in its various factions, but Syrian opposition, whether the Syrian National Army, or the new form of the Syrian Free Army, or the HTS, from going ahead and looking to liberate all of those areas and have them under the new central government. If this process goes smoothly, and Israel already said that they are opening channels with SDF, looking to get deals with them, Israel and its allies, but primarily Israel is trying to play on the minorities card as much as possible to instill division and hatred between the people of Syria and spread propaganda. Well, I mean, propaganda that's very difficult to kind of spread, because we saw the videos of the whole process in the past 2 weeks, and it's undeniable that it went on with hardly any bloodshed. I mean, even when it comes to the Syrian troops handed in their weapons and they are free. So many of the Assad forces now in Syria are free people, and the new Syrian government, they granted them amnesty. But Israel's still trying to play on the minorities and ethnicities cards, like they have when they established the state, with the typical colonialist approach. Israel is a neo-colonialist, expansionist entity. If this situation is resolved between the SDF and the central Syrian government, or the new transition government, we could be talking about more focus and a potential beginning of new negotiations and talks with many countries. With regards to Israel, however, they would be finding it extremely difficult if they would want to go down the route of talking with Israel. And Israel will try and extract as much as possible. As a matter of fact, this control, this illegal occupation of certain parts using the vacuum that has been created in Syria, is to test the new government and threaten them that, look, we are coming unless you are submitting to our will. However, even when they do occupy these territories, the Israelis are unlikely to give in any territories unless they are met by force. This is the case with Gaza, and this is the case with Lebanon, areas that Israel is currently occupying. Israel is still in Lebanon, because the 60-day ceasefire agreement is still ongoing, although we've had a lot of breaches and we had a response, and they are still occupying Gaza. And the only reason Israel would backtrack from these areas is armed resistance. So at one point, there's going to have to be a confrontation with Israel, unless something magical happens that we're not used to when it comes to Israel. Which leads me to the other point that I wanted to talk to you about. With the ceasefire talks in Gaza, and with the ceasefire or temporary ceasefire being implemented that is very fragile in Lebanon, many people will be asking, well, where are the attacks? Where are the fronts? Where are the resistance fronts operating against Israel? There are a couple of things to that answer. Number one, in Gaza, they are still facing intense resistance by the Palestinian side. In Lebanon, Hezbollah have been warning them, and they had an attack on Israel as well. But Hezbollah are trying to use the ceasefire to their favor, because the war wasn't easy on Hezbollah too, although they inflicted a lot of pain on Israel. But when it comes to Yemen, Yemen is still open. So today we had an attack inside of Tel Aviv. There was an explosion in a building in Tel Aviv, and the Ansarullah movement in Yemen declared that they targeted the strategic location in Sdoud, which is a coastal city in the southern occupied territories, and in Tel Aviv. Israel tried to ignore this attack, but we're talking about an attack that took place in the central part of Israel. This is a very significant attack. And Israel always tries to downplay what's happening when it comes to attacks being conducted against them. This is something that we're used to. However, this is not something to be undermined. Tel Aviv was a red line for Israel before that, although the Palestinian resistance had multiple strikes on it before, but now it's still under attack, indicating that, well, there will be no stopping up until we definitely have a ceasefire, which we don't have. There are hopes of a ceasefire. There's an advanced talk, but we still don't have a ceasefire. And the Yemeni front is continuing with its attacks on Israel. And the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the relation between Russia and Turkey when it comes to what's happening in Syria. Russia clearly has been taken by surprise in the initial phase. There are no indications that the Russian side or the Iranian side knew about the Operation Deterrence of Aggression before the Syrian opposition conducted it with support from Turkey. However, the tone shifted very quickly afterwards, both from Iran and from Russia. Iran spoke about treacherous behavior coming from Assad, and Russia, in many ways, as criticism, like, why didn't you continue the path of negotiations? Because it shook everyone in the beginning. It appeared to be that it was actually the opposition going against everything, when we had confirmations from Assad's closest allies that he was the one insisting on not participating with anyone and having anyone sharing the power inside of Syria, and having this transformation that Syria needed that much, that led to the opposition having this campaign. And then we saw how it was indeed implemented. Turkey and Russia are clearly aligned now when it comes to Syria, and the Iranian role is involved, but not in a very large manner. There was clearly coordination with Iran, but Syria and Turkey are in total coordination now when it comes to Syria. Erdogan, the Turkish president, he had a couple of statements. The first one was, we only have two leaders. There's only two main leaders remain in this world, and that's me and Putin, right? Erdogan reflects on global leadership. Only the two of us remain. Indicating that, we are the players now. We're the main players, me and Putin. He's not regarding the United States. He's not regarding other players too. We are going to be the ones calling the shots, well, the main shots when it comes to the region. He hasn't said these words, but now this is what it's indicating. We are having this influence, and this campaign is showing that they are indeed expanding their influence in the region. But the other thing that he shared that was interesting too was the fact that in the next few months, we will be seeing very important transitions for the world and for Turkey. He had a speech where he emphasized that the world is changing, and the next 2 to 3 months will be important. We will see what the Trump administration and the administration in the United States will be like, he's saying. The world will be completely different. The next 2 to 3 months are very important, as Turkey, and this is part of the article, as Turkey, we are doing our best and sending appropriate messages. Now, when it comes to the importance here, alongside this massive shift that's happening inside of Syria, this could also be an indication that we would be looking at one point towards an escalation inside of Syria that Turkey would be participating in. Again, because of the fact that we're going to be talking about a country like Syria, which is independent, Turkey will use its influence regardless of any agreements it has with NATO as Turkey, because we're talking about Syria. And they could potentially have a defense pact with Syria. If it reaches a level where they have a defense pact with Syria, that means Turkey will be at liberty to do whatever it wants when it comes to Syria, when it comes to tanks, when it comes to air defense, missiles, everything, to thwart and take down the threat that's coming from Israel. And if we reach that stage in the next 2 to 3 months, it would either force a solution on Israel and force it to withdraw from areas that it's illegally occupying now in Syria, or lead to a clash, a large clash between Turkey and Israel, seeing as we're talking about a front that will not be inside of Turkish territories. And these were the main things that I want to share with you in this video. As usual, I hope I shed some light and gave you relevant updates to what's happening, and I will see you soon in the next video. Peace.